a conversation with all things breathing. And this is, I suppose, three breathing nerds. And we just wanted to we were having a chat amongst ourselves, and we were wondering, where is breathing going? How has breathing arrived at this point? What has held breathing back? And anything that's got to do with it. So I'm joined with, of course, my sidekick here, Daniel Pålsson from Sweden, and another Swede that many of you will be familiar with is Anders Olsson, who was, of course, on the journey with James Nestors in the book Breath. So welcome, everybody. So welcome, Anders. And yeah, so just a little bit of background, and let's kick off. You've been teaching breathing. Where did you start? Where's it going? And all things breathing.
Yeah, so today you're outnumbered then by two Swedes, right?
Well, that's a hard one, so it is, Well, and if you start speaking Swedish, I'm absolutely out of the picture. So we'll stick to English, whatever chance I have.
Okay, yeah. Well, my breathing journey started in 2009 when I read a book, How to Swap Asthma for Life. And it was, to a large extent, about the Biochemistry method and how you could actually improve your asthma and eventually make it disappear by just turning to your breathing habits and improve those. And not long after that, I took your course in Denmark. So that was when we first met in 2000.
And that was Buteyko, wasn't it? It was, yeah. It was Buteyko in Copenhagen, yeah. Because Oxygen Advantage wasn't around by then.
No, that's true.
Yeah. And from there, so did you have asthma, Anders? I can't remember.
No, my issue was mainly a racing mind, problems to unlock the turbo and slow down. And I could notice almost immediately that it gave me a new tool, an ability to unlock the turbo, to slow down. And since then, I've just proven it to myself over and over again that carbon dioxide it has a calming effect on our mind. And I don't mind having my turbo at all. I love it, but sometimes it's not adequate. You need another gear. So for me, that was a huge thing. I realized when looking back that was the thing I probably have searched for my whole life, that ability to wind down. So it was a life-changing actually for me.
Can you imagine the number of people who are searching their whole life and they never actually find that solution, And I would say in terms of, this is another conversation, and I had a conversation with a journalist yesterday, she was talking about very much anxiety, but I was saying, okay, there's a lot of attention with people with anxiety, but what about the people who don't necessarily have anxiety, but their minds are all over the place?
Yeah.
And they cannot concentrate. And the other question is, I had a meeting last night with 40 instructors, and I asked them, show me how many of you here in this group have been taught how to concentrate. And out of the 40 people, only 2 put up their hands. Mm-hmm. And it ties in with exactly what you're saying. So your mind was racing, you were in turbo, and you came across breathing.
Yeah, simple as that, yeah.
But Anders, did you try other things before that, such as yoga or something else? Was this... and how did you get into breathing? What led you to breathing?
I tried many different things, like improving my working habits and thinking habits, sleeping habits. And I also tried meditation and yoga, but I couldn't really get, for example, meditation. I couldn't wind down. It's not that easy to meditate, actually, if you live up in your head. At least that was my experience.
Oh, it's totally. Yeah. And this is Anders, we can discuss this, that mindfulness, everybody out there knows pretty much about mindfulness. And can you imagine the person with the racing mind, that their physiology is in that fight or flight response and their sleep is impacted? When they start paying attention to their breathing and their mind is all over the place, the problem is the physiology is off. And John Kabat-Zinn, and even if you were to look at Vipassana with SN Goenka, the instruction is don't change your breathing. But in actual fact, this was fine back in the day when mindfulness was developed as a part of Buddhism, where people were living very natural lives.
Exactly.
Breathing was probably likely to be better. But for the modern individual, the one thing that we do need to do is actually change our breathing. So it's interesting that you speak about that.
Yeah, that's my experience as well. Mindfulness and meditation, they're great, but they are like 1, 2, 3, 4 steps up the ladder. We need to start with the basics, which we have kind of forgotten. And also what I find more and more is the connection with our emotions and with our emotional blockages. And when I look back, I can realize what was the root cause for my stress levels. And for me, it was when I grew up, I somehow installed a program saying that in order to be loved, I had to perform. So my racing mind came from that idea that love is connected to performance. And then if you perform more, well, then you can get more love, sort of, which was not very clever, but I guess a lot of us as well, we go around.
But it's not that it's not very clever, isn't it? Society wants us to do this, you know? Be good citizens and work your butts off and pay as much tax as possible. Yeah. Don't be a lounger, you know? I think society is putting a lot of pressure on us. And also, we then put this on our children.
We do, know? Yeah. Without knowing it. I mean, we basically just repeat the things that we were taught by our parents. So unless we're able to unplug from the rat race and take a step back and see the bigger picture and questioning, what am I doing? Then we will just, I guess, continue, go on and on and on with tunnel vision and just repeat what we have been taught.
Yeah. So, and I know, sorry, Daniel, I'm taking every bit of time here.
No problem.
But so you stepped out of the rat race and you took that risk then to, and I can kind of identify with that, to start teaching breathing. It's quite a big departure, you know?
Yeah.
How did it feel? Was it risky? Were you apprehensive about it?
I mean, I had to sell my house, and I had ran a quite successful IT company before, and I had sold it, but then my money started to, I started to run out of money, so I had to sell my house. And at that time, I was either finding a job that could give me an income, or I continued to develop the concept I've created, conscious breathing. And in order to do that, I didn't have enough money, so I had to sell my house. And at the time, I remember when I gave my first course, there were 1 participant, and the second course, there were 2 participants, and one of them who really needed it because he had asthma, and you could see all over his face that he was a chronic mouth breather and fast breather, but he decided to quit the course. So it was not a brilliant start, and at that time, I needed to make that decision. But at the end of the day, it was really, really easy, because as soon as I saw myself in a company setting, working for a salary, it was like I was trapped, I was boxed in. This was my life mission with spreading the breathing. And at the end of the day, it was a really easy decision.
So do you think it was good instinct, hunch, intuition? Something was driving you there?
Yeah, indeed, absolutely. It was my gut feeling. And before, I didn't always have the ability to access that. I believe when we live up in our head, it's really hard to be connected with our heart and our emotions and with our gut and our stomach and our gut feelings. So yeah, absolutely. I think it was the right decision.
Yeah.
And what year was that roughly?
That was 2009, 2010.
Okay.
So,
and then actually it's kind of interesting that we've Pat and myself done a few podcasts because you've done a few experiments here in Sweden with Klaus Björling, who has been on one of our podcasts. He was on one of your, so to speak, your experience. And I know you did an experiment, I'm not really sure, 10 years ago roughly, or whatever it was, with James Nestors, where you mouth breathed, forced to mouth breathe for a week, and how that affected your mind and your body. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was in 2018. We did that in Stanford. Yeah. So actually, it was 10 days. We blocked our nose, so we could only mouth breathe. And when James asked me, do you want to participate? No, I said, but I'm far too curious to not do it. So it was a mixed feeling when we started that, plugging our nose and only mouth breathing. But I don't want to have it undone, because it was really, really interesting to be 100% mouth breather for that long. At least that was how I felt it, 10 days.
Mm-hmm.
So it had a huge negative impact on my sleep, on my stress levels, on my sugar cravings, on my mind. I felt many times I felt really stupid, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And the balance, that was interesting, how it affected my balance as well. One of the things we did, just as an example, we measured tons of things 3 times per day, 1 hour each time. So in total, 3 hours per day, plus a lot of things we measured at Stanford. One of the things was to just close our eyes and stand on one leg. And with mouth breathing, I had to put down the other foot 6 times more than with nasal breathing. That's really a lot.
I think that's partly due to the position of the tongue, but there's very little research on it, Anders. There was one study that they did something similar. They blindfolded individuals and they changed the position of the tongue. And with the position of the tongue resting in the roof of the mouth, they had better balance on an uneven surface. And it's very, very interesting that most people won't consider. But in the main, it's kind of sad to think that between 25 to 50% of studied children persistently mouth breathe and nobody is saying anything. And most doctors don't see a difference between breathing through the nose and breathing through the mouth.
No.
They don't see that difference. It's really, really amazing.
It is. It's unfortunately, it's detrimental for our health. You know the book Shut Your Mouth and Save Your Life that came out 150 years ago? Yeah.
Yes.
Even though you could dismiss it as just anecdotal because it doesn't have any actual data from the Indian tribes. But what he saw more than anything was that they had their mouth closed and they had superior health, straight teeth and beautiful faces compared to the, at the time in the 1850s, the bill of mortality, only 1 out of 4 could celebrate their 25th birthday. 3 out of 4, they died before that age. And yeah, for sure, the tongue in the roof of the mouth and nasal breathing, it has such a huge impact.
And it was written about again, sorry, Daniel, back in 1909, I think it was an article by DeLong in a journal called Dental Cosmos. And when you're reading it, it talks about children in class being inattentive. And the teacher is accusing these children of not paying attention. The face is dull and expressionless. And we could read that today, 113 or 14 years later. It's the exact same issues as back in 1909. Why do you think it hasn't moved on? Why there's something holding breathing back?
Well, I think there are a few things, but still, when I started, and you started much earlier than me, right? Then at the time, it was really not very well known compared to then. Today, it's a huge difference, but still, we are just scratching the surface. I see a few things. One is the medical community. I mean, you can't really train to become a doctor for 6, 7, 8 years and tell people how to breathe. Anyone could tell that if you think of breathing just like a very simple thing, but actually it is much more complex than we think. And another thing, I think.
So do you think do you think it's too simple for the medical doctor? Why spend 8 years training in medical school and devote a part of that 8 years to something which is regarded as kind of left of field woo-woo, even though it's entirely based in physiology? And even though we could argue that it impacts all of the major disciplines of medicine: sleep, respiration, mental health, movement.
I think that's a part of it, yes. There are very few people that can build their career on doing breathing research, for example. There should be more. I mean, if I'm 25 and okay, I want to cure the cancer, you probably won't go for breathing immediately. You would consider other paths, and you also need funding, right? And probably the funding for breathing isn't really there either. So I think there are a lot of things, and also the fact that in the medical community you have all these specialties. So if you're specialized in the nose, or you're specialized in asthma, or you're specialized in the heart, you may not be able to see the bigger picture. You may not be able to see that, oh, we have a common denominator here, that people are not breathing very well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think also another factor is to go to us as individuals, because taking responsibility for our breath, that really means that we also take responsibility for our health and our life. And not a lot of us are prepared to do that. That's scary. But many of us, I think, we spend most of our life just running away from the things that scares us the most, the traumas we have, which we all have, right?
Well, I think that, Anders, that the breathing is kind of hidden in plain sight. That it's something you do so many times you don't really pay attention to it, and it shifts slowly for most people for years. So you don't think about it. You kind of just adjust. You adjust to it. But if it's like same with weight gains, so to some degree, if you gain 70 pounds overnight, you would be, you would notice it. But if you do it over 40 years, you don't really think about it. No. And I think one reason I saw you also have an Oura ring. I could see that. Yeah. And now you can see. Now you can actually see it. You get like these the data points every day, visualizations, and I think that will help, like a portable doctor. That will give people feedback and help them say, oh, it's getting worse or better. Before, there wasn't really until something happened. So somebody would asthma or something. But if you're kind of like in between, you're kind of like, oh, you just live with it. Yeah. So I think it's part of it, I think, as well, that it's something you should naturally do. Most people think about, like Patrick said, we don't breathe the same way we did, thousands of years ago. We have a completely different life, but we assume our physiology will be the same. And it's not. When you sit still all day, look at screens, you have stress all day, that alters the breathing pattern. So I think it's tricky. And then also to pay for something that's free. You do it already. So it's it doesn't fit in our economy, right? Yeah. Even though you may argue this is one of the most important things you can do. And if you learn how to change it, still, it's so that I think that's the dichotomy. That's the paradox why it's kind of hidden, what I call hidden in plain sight, because you can't really see it. No, and I, as you say, I really think that all these gadgets can help people understand what is the price for the lifestyle choices I make. Yeah. For example, if you have a tracker at night, you will be able to see that maybe alcohol has a negative impact on my sleep, or eating too late, or eating too much, or unplugging from social media too late, etc., etc. Yeah, I think for many people, that's the first step, awareness that it matters. Then once you're aware, then you have to know what to do. It's not enough to have a gadget that just tells you, okay, these are the numbers. Then you have to know what to do, why you're doing it, when you're doing it. And also, like anything else, you need kind of people to help you to build the habit sometimes. Like, even though you know what to eat, people don't do it. Even though you know exercise is good for you, you don't do it. So I think it's a long road, and we're still at the awareness stage in the breathing world, I would say. It's not enough. There's not enough people in the world that's aware of it. No, I agree totally. But we are moving in the right direction. Yeah. And one reason I believe why we know all the things that are good for us and still we don't do them, I think it boils down to energy, and their sleep is so important. And in today's society, we have a tendency to I mean, it's almost, wow, you have a superpower. You only sleep 5 hours per night. Wow. And we are jealous about that person. But
I'm not sure if that is long-term beneficial. I think we should prioritize sleep much more. And just if we ask the question, do you wake up to the alarm? If we do that, that means actually that we are depriving our body of the sleep it needs and wants. And I think most people do that. And what we also forget, if we have realized that sleep is important, we tend to forget the connection between breathing and sleep. It's not only about laying down in bed and sleep. We also have to consider our breathing while sleeping.
I agree. Yeah. So what as far as where do you think breathing is at right now? What does it take to make it move forward? Do you have any ideas of where you think should happen to make it, more awareness around the world?
I know Victor Hugo, he said, nothing is stronger than an idea whose time has come. And I guess it's just for us breathing nerds to continue spreading this simple knowledge. And we plant seeds, and over time, those seeds will grow. And over time, people will tell other people. So at some point, we will create a tipping point, and it will just be very natural, I think, for people to not, in the first instance, when they have health issues, go to surgery or pills or syringes, but to go to themselves and see what they can do. And a lot of things like sleep and breathing and emotional release, those are free, or moving, exercising. Yeah.
I think I saw it was Mind Valley that said this. They're kind of trying to create this new type of university, but basically at the bottom of their teaching, or whatever you want to call it, is focus. So if you're not focused, you're not kind of open to whatever subject you're talking about, math or English or whatever. Yeah. But if you want to be focused, breathing is key. So
because focus needs energy. Our brain is our main consumer of oxygen, and if we have fight-flight breathing when we're concentrating, it may not be optimum.
Yeah. So for me, I think we need to get it. It's important to get it into schools. That's the point. You need to bring it back to like the generation growing up, where breathing is then a natural thing, that you actually learn to breathe and focus before or in parallel with other subjects. Because if you're not focused, then the door is shut for learning. So it's kind of like you're in school, but nothing. You don't really learn. So then they test people more and more, and it makes them more and more stressed. So instead, maybe focus on teaching young kids how to breathe, how to focus, and then slowly bring them into actually learning the subjects. That's like the kind of like the opposite. But then it becomes a habit, and when the habit is formed and it's automatic, then it becomes natural. So I think it could also be a generation issue, that it's going to happen sooner or later, but it may take 10, 15, 50 years, who knows, but hopefully sooner than later.
I think it needs to start straight away, Daniel. I think it's absolutely terrible. I went through the school system, as all of us have done. I didn't have a great experience with it. I got out at 14 years of age, never to go back. And out of total frustration. You can have very, very bright kids with poor sleep and poor breathing, and they are not going to do well academically. And their self-confidence is going to be affected for the rest of their life, because you will always compare yourself to your peers when you're in that classroom environment, because society is telling you whether you're intelligent or not based on what you do academically, even though, of course, it has got very little to do with intelligence. It's got something to do with it, but it's not the entire picture. And I'm just thinking of the number of kids in school and in high schools and in university, where the point that you made, there is a demand and an absolute need to be focused, to narrow your attention to one thing, to be able to hold your attention, to be concentrated, and also to have a decent attention span. And it has been completely overlooked in the education system. These kids are not being taught how to concentrate. And it's not about mindfulness. I think it's huge. I think it's crying out for help. Maybe I don't want to go into the religion to ask too much, but sometimes I feel that it's kind of ironic that interest in institutionalized religion is wavering and decreasing, and interest in breathing is increasing. And I'm wondering, is breathing going to be the void or fill the void to some degree? Because, as human beings, we need to be able to have something that when things go wrong, that we have some tools to bring us solace. And traditionally, it was the church.
Yeah.
Things go wrong, you visited Mass, you had a higher being who was looking after you, and it gave you relief. Now, when things go wrong, many people are not going to church. Could breathing be that solace?
I think that's a really interesting point, Patrick. And one way of looking at it, I think, is that not only religion, we can also see how we, in general, we look for external things. We look for authorities, whether they are religious or political leaders or money or medication. We have a tendency to overlook the enormous power we have inside. So I think you are right that we are doing a shift where we put less and less of our efforts into external authorities as we turn to our breathing and are able then to connect with our inner self and our inner power. I did a podcast interview a couple of days ago, and there we discussed a study which I think is really interesting. They did it on rats, and those poor rats, but yeah, that's I guess how it is. And they throw them in water, and they wanted to see how long they would survive before drowning. And on average,
it's some
it's not very nice, these poor rats. But anyway, they on average for 15 minutes they survived before sinking down and drowning. But before they drowned, they picked them up and put them to the side, and then they were laying there for a few minutes, just catching their breath. And then they threw them in the water again because they wanted to see how long would they be able to do it the second time, a shorter time, the same, or longer. I thought maybe they would only be able to do shorter because I thought maybe they were then conditioned to giving up. But they did longer, and not only longer, they did a huge amount longer. They were able to stay there for 60 hours. So they went from 15 minutes to 60 hours just because their mind, first they was in fight flight, doing away with all their resources. They were in panic state, probably breathing very fast, and all the alert system were on red alert. The second time, they were sure that someone would save them. They were more calmer, more relaxed. Probably the breathing was then also more relaxed. They had hope. They knew that there was someone caring for them, but there wasn't actually someone caring for them, but that was probably what they thought. So I think when we reduce the fear and stress and worry, we can grow as human beings enormously. We have so much untapped potential, whether it's our health or whether it's love and cooperation, because right now we are not so nice, not to each other, not to the planet, not to the animals, not to the plants. I think we need to step up in order to give something nice to our kids that are growing up now.
I totally agree.
Yeah, that's an interesting start. What was the purpose of it? Did they actually check their breathing specifically, or was it?
No, I don't think so. No, it was more to see how they would react.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I send you the study.
Yeah. Because I mean, there have been other studies. I think you had them in your book, Patrick, as far as with CO2 and these rats that live in. I can't remember the names.
Oh, that was the naked mole rat.
Yeah, naked that don't get cancer and so.
Yeah.
So, but that's more in a natural habitat.
It is, and it's always difficult as well to kind of show that relationship.
Yeah.
Like we know that they're able to survive in high CO2 environment, low oxygen environment. Yeah. Is it because of the CO2 and the low oxygen that they're able to resist cancer? nobody has really that answer. But there's something in it. Yeah, it's interesting. It is.
But also moving forward, I think schools are very important and for it to really take off, because there is where you form the habit, and you also, it becomes a part of your life. You need some good habits to, kind of like you do physical exercise, and you can, of course, you can combine it with physical exercise, but you actually do it. But I think actually also I think Wim Hof has really also helped everybody in this community to make it very visual of breathing, with more forceful breathing and the cold. So I think if people are led to that breathing method, they will naturally over time go somewhere else. So I think that's also that's a natural progression, I think, in every area, wherever you are, Yeah. So I think that also helps, and so you can see it, but it's still moving forward, and it's not. I think yoga is great, but it's more like what we're trying to do here is to bring breathing into everyday life, every second at work. It's not something you do in the basement and then for 2 hours or 1 hour, then you're done.
1,000 breaths we take per hour. How can we, if we want to unlock the turbo, how can we move away from fight-flight breathing to rest and digest, safe and secure breathing? Yeah.
And there's the question that I often feel, it's based on Daniel's point there. All of the sports sciences and professors working in this field, teaching strength and conditioning coaches, and teaching all of those youngsters who are going to go out into the fitness industry, why have they no interest in breathing? Why have they no interest in nasal breathing during exercise? Why are they not looking at the relationship between breathing and movement? Because we know, of course, if breathing is off, movement is off, and the athlete has an increased risk of injury. Why aren't they not looking at breathing in terms of changing states of mind? I'm really intrigued, and even just coming back to the one thing about the nose, because, if we bring it down to that very, very basic level, there's only been a handful of sports medicine sciences. One is George Dallam from Colorado State University. And he's been very interested in it because he's seen the results with triathletes that he's been working with at a very high level. What do you think is going to cause that shift? Because, Daniel, I'm just thinking, can you imagine every strength and conditioning coach in the gym? And you have all of these members coming into the gym, all of the personal trainers. And if the personal trainers were aware of it, you breathe through your nose, you got better recruitment of the diaphragm, all of the stuff that we know, that could be transformative.
Yeah, it could be. And I have one take on that. There was a study where they measured adrenaline levels. So they were hyperventilating, and normal air first, the adrenaline levels rose by, I think, 360%. And then they did it again a week later. They hyperventilated, but this time the air was spiked with 5% CO2. So the CO2 levels were more or less the same. And then the adrenaline levels didn't change either, telling us that when you lower CO2, because in the first hyperventilating, they reduced the CO2 by about 50%, then adrenaline goes up. So if we take a step back and ask ourselves, why do we love to exercise? Maybe one reason is because we want that adrenaline rush. And if we do nasal breathing and keep more CO2 in our body, it's like we're taking away that effect from people, and there is something missing. No, I don't know what it is, but I don't like it. I want to be in fight-flight state. I want to feel strong based on adrenaline. But I think there is another level, being strong based on higher levels of CO2. Then you actually don't need your fists as much. You don't need to run for your life. You feel just strong from the inside out.
I think
that could be an explanation.
Yeah, I think that comes back, Patrick, to your question a little bit, what we talked about before, that there is science, maybe they haven't read it, but they haven't done it necessarily in school. So they haven't experienced it for themselves. Then they haven't seen it on others. And then they haven't read the science.
I think this is the key, Daniel.
So it's a progression. You have to have those three in place.
Yes.
If you only have some science, but you haven't tried on anybody else, you haven't tried it yourself, then it's not strong enough. There's not.
The key is the reason that I'm in breathing, and so many more, including yourselves, when we practiced a specific pattern of breathing, we got results and we knew there was something in it.
Yeah.
And I think what has held breathing back is that breathing has been taught all over the shop for the last number of decades. We'd say the last 40 decades, with not having a full understanding of what's actually involved with breathing, that it's more complex, that it's more multidimensional, and not to rely on the extroverted breathing technique of hyperventilation, or not even hyperventilation, simply filling your lungs full of air. The problem which has held back the biochemistry of breathing, and when you're talking about carbon dioxide, Anders, is when you're doing really, really light breathing, subtle breathing, under breathing, there is nothing to see. But this was really caught me. I remember when I started practicing this breathing less air, which totally flies in the face what many people are talking about. Even to this day, the temperature of my hands increased. And when you experience changes in your body as a result of that, you know there's something in it. And it does come back to what Daniel is saying. This is not about theory. This is about practicing exercises to open up your nose, to improve your blood vessels, to increase oxygen delivery, to change states, and to experience it. What do you think?
No, I agree totally. And I mean, the day some athlete does something that Roger Bannister did, he did the impossible. So when someone wins, an Olympic gold medal in 5,000 meters and just doing nasal breathing, then probably ends at world record. Then probably.
It's going to be, Black people do have a better African origin, have a much better nasal structure than ourselves, especially a white person like me with his one nostril smaller than the others. I'm not going to be doing any 5,000 meters. But that would be the key, because your ability to do physical exercise with the mouth closed is going to be influenced by nose size and nasal cavity size. But it could happen. Like you've seen the photographs of Sonia Richards-Ross, I think, is the runner, and she's a 400-meter sprinter, and she won a number of golds in the London Olympics. And in a few photographs online, you see her in full flight, and she's got her mouth closed. Like it's pretty amazing. So I think it does need that's why Wim Hof, in terms of he has been able to put it out there because, of course, what he's been able to achieve in terms of the extreme feats. It seems that it'll get attention when there's something huge.
Yeah. It's also, I think when they run, Patrick, I think it's only if you're observing somebody and you, like yourself, you see one person mouth breathing, which is normal when you run 400 meters or 5,000 meters, versus another one who's not. But if they had these like they had tape on their noses in football, I can't even remember 15 years ago. But it didn't really, I guess it was there for a year or two, then it didn't really take up. At least you saw it. Or when you have something physical, something that you can see, but if you don't see it, again, it's hidden because most people wouldn't pay attention. Oh, he's not breathing. And there is actually a few videos on Instagram with Rafael Nadal and Roger Federer, where they go back and forth for like 30 shots, unbelievably running from side to side. And the reason, most people don't think about it, but what I find amazing is after the point, they're both nose breathing. You don't see them panting at all. It's unbelievable. So, but most people wouldn't pay attention because it's kind of hidden. So I think that's one reason. It's almost the more successful you are, the less you breathe, the less you see it. So that's one part of the reason, I think.
Yeah.
So where do we need to go with it?
Yeah, I have one idea, and that is that actually, well, first, when I spread conscious breathing, I don't try to convince anyone. I'm just planting seeds. I'm just turning to those who are willing to listen. In the beginning, I tried to save the world, try to reach everyone, but then I realized it
doesn't work.
There. No, it doesn't work. So only
their eyes glaze over. Here's another weirdo left of field.
Yeah, how can I get out of here?
I've been there too, yeah.
Yeah, but one thing I'm thinking is that actually nature is playing on our side, because we see that whether we believe in climate change or not, there is an increase in CO2 in the atmosphere. And if we try to understand what was the reason why the civilized people in the 1850s living in cities had much poorer health than the savages, the Indian people referred to in this book, Shut Your Mouth and Save Your Life. One reason could be maybe that they spent more time indoors, they had more insulated house, and then the CO2 levels, they increase, right? Because we are CO2 factories. So nowadays we spend like 90% of our time indoors, and we have very well insulated houses, and the CO2 levels are about 2 times as high as the atmospheric levels, which are also increasing. So it's like our exposure to CO2 is getting bigger and bigger. And now with the last couple of years, with the lockdowns, where we spend even more times indoors, and with the masks, where we rebreathe even more of the CO2 than normally, that it's like we're coming to a crossroad. Either you are able to deal with these higher levels of CO2 that you're exposed to, and you're able to reach a new level of awareness, or you fall into the other category where you start to breathe more. So maybe, I'm not saying that I like what's going on when we dig up all the oil and we consume way too much, because that's the structure of our community. If we stop consuming, the whole society will fall apart. So we need to consume. I'm not saying that I like that, but maybe it's helping us to reach a new level of awareness so that we can create a society that is more long-term sustainable.
It's difficult to know, because I think the vast majority of people, even wearing the masks, they react to the increased CO2 and air hunger with hyperventilation.
Yeah, they do. Yeah, that's my point. So it's like a crossroad. If you're able to deal with it, then you will actually be able to benefit from it. But I agree, most people, they will probably end up open up their mouth and breathe higher up.
So this initially then comes down to, it's really the awareness that you spoke about. You're talking about in and out through the nose, breathing light, breathing slow, breathing low.
Yeah.
I find it interesting. I'm going back to that, what you just said earlier, Anders, about, kind of like saving the world and planting seeds. I even though I agree with it, is there really no way to accelerate that process when there's something so important? It seems like maybe a naive illusion, but at the same time, something that's that important. Is there no way? Because the people who are interested in breathing are normally there's too few, and they have usually some sort of they're biohackers, have some sort of problem, but it's not the masses. So how do you reach them? Any ideas on that?
I mean, for me, that's where I come from. Stress, performance, tension. So if I adopt that mentality, I will see myself being more stressed, more tense. So no, I just continue with the one step at a time, more Zen approach. Otherwise, I would not be able to do this, I think. I would be too frustrated, and
I understand that. I understand.
It's easy to fall into it, Anders.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose, Daniel, if we look at what has really catapulted this, was in the last couple of years, was James Nestors' book, Breath. So we need more books getting out there into the public imagination. If I was asked what was the single biggest thing that made the biggest contribution to breathing in the last 20 years, it was that book.
I agree.
And in many instances, we were working in that's a lot of the information, in our circle, we knew it, but we didn't have the ability of getting it out there into that general public. And James was able to script a wonderful book with stories to capture the imagination. We need more of that. But I think it's about It's about targeting it from a number of different perspectives. And if I was asked, what sector has the biggest potential to transform lives, is the yoga community. Can you think of the modern yoga instructor that understands breathing from a biochemical point of view, a biomechanical point of view, a resonance frequency point of view, that understands the vagus nerve, understands sleep, understands changing states, understands how to assess the breathing of their student coming into class, and understands how to bring breathing off the mat. And all of those hundreds of thousands of people going into yoga studios with asthma, with panic disorder, with high stress, with insomnia, with all of these issues, that the yoga instructor could transform this by simply bringing this information. It's the knowledge. It's not that anything massive has to be done. It's just a matter of tweaking what's already out there. And we have to put aside the image that breathing is about left of field and woo-woo and airy-fairy and energy and crystals and all of that. Breathing is absolutely for the people. And that's where we need to drive it. I think it's happening. But I don't know where to bring it. That's my issue.
No, but maybe they were just like James' book came and made a huge difference. Probably
Yes.
there would be new things coming
Yes.
from the side and help to grow this. And
Yeah.
Regarding research, I think it's very important. And my dream has been for a long time to create my own research institute. I'm still working on it. So we have this device we have been developing now for almost 5 years.
What's it about? You're going to let me into your secrets.
Oh yeah, it's called breath key. So you basically analyze. It's like a capnometer. You analyze the oxygen and the carbon dioxide, and your breathing frequency, your breathing volume, your breathing rhythm, and also the temperature and humidity. And I mean, the big vision with this project is if a dog can smell cancer or diabetes, which they can, why in the world shouldn't our electronic nose also be able to do the same? I think that we will be able to discover over time, when we have a lot of measurements and data, see patterns and see like, okay, there is a breath print, like a fingerprint for an asthmatic, for a person with panic attacks, for a person with sleep problems, etc.
A breath DNA.
Yeah, breath DNA. Yeah.
I think that's a part of the as well, Anders and Patrick, is when you get these biometric devices more and more, when that becomes mainstream and you're looking to see what affects, and eventually you will hear about breathing, and then eventually everybody will have them whenever that is. But I can tell when people have it on, it's still far from mainstream, but it's getting more and more exposure, and also, of course, a ring. Maybe that's the point. You don't really pay attention unless you're looking for it. So again, but eventually it will happen. I think it's very important to get that feedback in the first couple of years or whatever it is to see what affects you. Because if you don't do it, then you don't really know if you're going in the right direction. So I think all these devices, I know some are negative, will help to spread it. And eventually get into schools as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
It would be wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in terms of the final 10 years from now, I really feel that the trajectory where it's going, Anders, is going to be very interesting. I think it's moving. I know traditionally when a concept gets into health, it takes about 20 to 25 years, and it takes 500 papers on PubMed.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I suppose we can also draw on the research over the last 30 years with heart rate variability. So in many ways, we have the research out there in terms of changing states and resilience. And it's knowing the techniques then to impact that. And it comes back to the devices that Daniel was talking about. The devices are giving you feedback. But the real question is, how do you alter? How do you improve it? How do you optimize it? And we can do that by breathing. And it does start with sleep, I would agree with you. And also with nasal breathing. Because if you have insomnia and sleep disorder breathing, already your recovery is going to be impacted negatively.
Yeah.
and it is also brought in by your everyday. But one thing that you seem to feel that breathing could be the savior of the planet. I don't want to put that out in an exaggerated way, but you see that there's a role that when people become more engrossed, not engrossed with breathing, but more aware of their breathing, that it will give them a better capacity to be more caring for themselves, for the people they're around, but also for the environment at large.
I absolutely 100% certain about that. For me, the Conscious Breathing Project, I mainly talk about it as a health project, a performance project, but at the end of the day, the core is a peace project, because if you have peace on the inside, there will be peace on the outside. You will communicate more peacefully, you will act more peacefully, you will be kinder, you will cooperate better. And I think that is where we need to go. I think we're all in this together. We do this journey together. So it doesn't matter if I take care of myself very good, I eat all the right things, I breathe, I sleep, etc. And then someone that is not feeling well is getting drunk and goes into the car and drive me over. It doesn't really matter then how well I have taken care of myself. I really think we need to and have the attitude of helping each other, that really we do this together. So let's help each other to grow and evolve and become a better version of ourselves. And yeah, I think breathing is a core. It helps you to coordinate. The breathing rhythm will affect the heart rhythm, the brain rhythm, and the digestive rhythm. So we will be able to sync with the breath as the leader, as the CEO in me incorporated. It will be able to sync the brain waves with the heart rhythm, with the stomach.
It'd be very interesting in 5 years' time to, or maybe sooner, hopefully sooner, to come back and kind of see where breathing is at. And it's maybe if you can go back and say, well, it was because of biometric devices, it was because of influencer, Instagram, or whatever, because, or all, maybe everything, or whatever it is, because it will be very interesting. I guess most of the time whenever you guess, you make the wrong prediction. So it would be very interesting to do that, actually.
Yeah.
Because I think like both of you see, there's a lot of things going on in the breathing space, and it's kind of going faster and faster. So I think, ironically, I think in 5 years' time, we'll see we're at a place, and maybe breathing is a completely different place. It'll be very interesting, at least, to see.
Be super. Yeah. Well, I think it's been a pleasure.
Yep, absolutely.
Anders
Indeed.
and Daniel, it's been very good. It's actually, in fact, different podcast, because we've spoken at least oftentimes you feel the podcast that kind of you talk about the one thing over and over and over and over. So here we did something different, so that was kind of nice. So
I love that. Yeah,
it's always good. So Anders, if
do it again.
We'll do it again.
Absolutely.
If people want to find out a little bit more about you, they go to your website.
Yeah, consciousbreathing.com, and it's the same name on Facebook and YouTube and Instagram, Conscious Breathing.
Yeah. It's a pleasure, guys.
Great. Thank you so much, Anders.
Thank you.
Thank you, Anders.
Thank you.